Okay, so how are we going to grow high-brix food? The very first thing is to get a soil test, okay? Get a soil test. We're told that we should farm scientifically. Get a soil test. I can't stress that too much. Otherwise, we're dealing with unknowns, and you'll get some real problems because of what's been put on the soil before, or because what God did at the flood. And if we have that soil test, we could be 1,000 miles apart, and you read yours, and I'll have a copy of yours there, and I'll get off the internet, and I'll know exactly what to do with your soil there. First of all, what are we going to do? How are we going to take a soil sample? We're going to go around and get You use a clean bucket. What I do is to take a 5-gallon bucket and put a brand new clean plastic bag in it there. Now you want to take soil samples from different parts of your garden. And if you have beds, you want to take a little bit from each bed. If you have soil that is quite different, you might need 2 soil tests. If you have soil that has been treated differently, you might need more than 1 soil test. But if that soil has all been treated pretty much the same, then just take a little bit from each bed. I end up with about 1 gallon of material. I spread that out. Again, on a brand new clean plastic bag. You don't want this polluted at all. Mix it all together so you have a good average, and from that you want to take about 1 quart of that material, put it in a 1-quart Ziploc bag. Make it a little less than 1 quart. If you fill it totally full, it won't fit in that small flat rate box there. Okay. Unless you are a big farm, for the backyard garden, get S1, which is soil analysis with recommendations. That's $50, okay? That's the same price I pay for it. This goes to International Ag Labs. Then go down to boron. You need boron there. Okay, those 2 you need for sure. That's going to add another $10, so this is going to be $60 that you owe to the lab. Okay, that's a total of $60 there. Tells you where to send it. I need to know, in order to help you, I need to know how many square feet your garden is. So just take a measurement and give me the square footage of that garden. Okay, you send it down here to International Ag Labs. This is the Ag Lab that was started by Dr. Kerry Reeves. That's about it. Now, if you're a big farm, I might have you do other things, but this is all we need at this point. Go to the post office, get the smallest flat rate box they have, okay? That 1-quart Ziploc bag, not totally full, will just fit in there very nicely. You put this in with it. You can send these people a check, or you can use a credit card. And down at the bottom here it says, would you like us to send a copy of your results to your dealer? If you check yes, I'll get a copy of it. And when you get your copy, I want you to call me, and then I'll be able to pull this up on the internet, and you and I'll be looking at the same report. I'll be looking at your soil, and you'll be looking at it and yours, and we'll know exactly what to do. What's it going to look like? Okay, let's just go to this. We'll have to work off of this. All right, this is what it's going to look like. So this says Soil Analysis Report, and it'll have your name up here. This happens to be the Pine Hills Adventist Academy in Auburn, California. You'll have a lab number here and a date. I'm going to need your name and this number right here, lab result, in order to pull that up. Unless it's a very new report, I'll need the date. If you have one that's a year or so old, I need the date on it too. Okay, so we start out here with humus. That just means organic material when it has totally been degraded and is back to a form that your plants can take those nutrients up again. And in this case, we need a level of 30 to 40, and we had 30. That's very unusual and very good. This is for raised beds there. Then we go down to the nitrates, and they're right on, and ammonia. The ammonias are also nitrogens. They do a different thing in the soil, and so we need to bring that up. That's an easy fix. Okay, now look at phosphorus here. We want a level of 174, and we have 1,410. Is that a problem?
Yes.
That's a huge problem. Okay? That's a huge problem. Now, how on earth did this get so far out of balance? It was because the teachers there and the people who ran this garden in the past, they'd go to the garden store and they would say, well, what's a good product for me to put in here? And so somebody would say in the store, they say, well, this is a good product, or this helps, or somebody else says, I use such, and so they get it. Also, manures can make this go way up, all right? Compost can make that go way up, out of balance. Now the phosphate in the soil stays where we put it. You can't leach it out. We talked about leaching the salt out. You can't leach that phosphate out. It just stays there. It's a problem. Anytime we have too much of one thing, it's going to make an imbalance someplace else. And now things will grow in that garden, but you will not get good food, and you're not going to get food that tastes the way we want it to, and that gives you the nutrients and the healing power that we want to have. So what do we do with a problem like this? Well, there are several things. One is we can dilute that. Let's say that I would bring in some new soil. These are raised beds, and so the soil has a tendency to shrink down over the time. So let's say I could add an equal amount. Let's say we had this much soil in those beds, and I could add that much more on top, and I could get a soil that had 0 phosphate, okay? So if I had 0 phosphate, and I'm mixing it 50-50 with this, what have I done? Instead of 1,410, I've got 705, right? So right away we cut it way down there. Now, some of you are familiar with double digging. So if you dig deeply and you can mix that subsoil, it's not going to have 0 phosphate, but it's going to have less. And so that's a way of doing it. Another thing that we do is to crop it out. Now, that takes a long time, but how do we crop it out? Grow things that are heavy feeders. That means corn, that means tomatoes, anything in the squash family, including cucumbers. Those are all heavy feeders. All right? When that garden is through and the snow flies, and you put that stuff in a compost pile, when that compost is ready, you don't put it back into the garden. Okay? You go use it on your landscaping or lawn or someplace else. Don't put it back in the garden. It's going to take several years, but over a period of time, you can get that down some. Okay. Now, here's potassium, and we want 167, and we've got 529. So we're way over in the potassium also. Let's go to calcium. Calcium is 3,000. This is pounds per acre. 3,000 pounds per acre. I want you to look above that number and below that number and realize you need more calcium than everything else in that list put together. Okay? We need a tremendous amount of calcium there. Okay? Let's go to magnesium next. We need 429. We're at 263. So our magnesium is down. That's an easy fix. Sodium. Now we're going to parts per million here. That little sign says that we need less than 35 parts per million, and we have 4. That is very, very good because that means we can use the ocean water salts to very good advantage in this garden here. Let's go to ergs. You can write in there that that's energy release per gram per second. Energy release per gram per second. Now, all that is telling me is that we have conductivity in the soil. If I come out to your farm or your garden, I'll have a little probe, I'll put it in the ground, it'll tell me the conductivity in the soil. It doesn't tell me what's in the soil. This tells me what's in the soil, but it tells me whether there's conductivity there or not. Okay, and that's important because the plants are actually living off of that energy in the soil. We say they're living off of calcium and potassium and nitrogen and so forth, and they are. But it's the reaction that creates the energy that those plants are really using. So that is important. The next is ORP, right in there, that is oxygen reduction potential. We want 28, and we're right on there. The next is the pH. It's an extremely important number. We really want to be, for fruits and vegetables, we want to be someplace between 6 and 7, and we're at 6.8. We're just fine there. Copper. We want, now, copper, iron, zinc, manganese, boron, and sulfur. These are all trace minerals, and here we want to be towards the high side. We want to be within the desired range, but we want to be towards the high side for fruits and vegetables there. So copper, we really want to be at 2.5, and we're at 15.7. Okay, we are way out of balance there. Okay, let's go over to iron next. We want to be at about 25, and we're at 37. Very high, not too bad, though. I'm not too worried about that number. Let's go to zinc, though, and I need to be at 6 or maybe a little less, and we are at 23.8. We are just out of sight on this. Manganese. This is a very, very important mineral, different than magnesium above. This is a trace mineral, manganese, and it does a lot of interesting things in the soil. One of the key things it does, it brings the spark of life into that seed so that it'll sprout. And if there's not enough manganese in the soil, the seed won't even sprout. And if it does sprout and grow with this low of manganese, it'll have a hard time making seeds, which means it's going to have a hard time flowering and fruiting and making seeds. There, that number's got to go up, and this is often low on soil tests. This is particularly important on your fruit trees, too. Okay, let's go to boron next, and we need to be between 1 and 2. This is at 1.2, so we're medium, we're okay there. We don't need to test sulfur or organic matter and so forth there. Okay, so that tells us the problem, and then in an effort to solve the problem, these are our recommendations. Let's skip that for right now. Let's go over a couple of pages. And this says native soil. Over here it was raised beds, okay? They have beautiful, nice raised beds about that high. Did a beautiful job with it. But now we're at the native soil here. Now, the humus is 20, so it's way down. The nitrates are way up. We're okay with that. The ammonia, also nitrogen, is way, way down. Incidentally, the nitrogens do two different things here. The calcium nitrates are going to make your leaves and your stems grow. Okay? So if you want lettuce and chard and cabbage, whatever, and root crops, you want calcium nitrate. If you want things to flower and fruit, you want the ammonia nitrogens, okay? And we can switch a plant from growing leaves and stems to flowers and fruit. It's simple, it's easy, and you can see it within a week or two there. Okay, so we're way down here. This is an easy fix, not a problem there. Look at the phosphorus here. We have a deficiency of phosphorus here. We want 174, we only have 86 here. What do we have on the previous page? 1,410, okay? This is the same schoolyard there. What we're having them do is to take this native soil and sift it because it has a lot of rocks in it, and then we take that and we are mixing it with some of this stuff to dilute it and to make better beds there. Okay. Potassium is 202. That's where it should be, about right. The calcium here is way down. Remember the previous page was over 4,000 here. Magnesium we need to bring up. Sodium is low again, which is good. Okay, let's see. The copper is right where it should be instead of way over the top here. And iron, well, this iron is higher. We might have got a nail in there or something. Incidentally, when you're taking the soil sample, use a clean instrument. That means one without rust on it, okay? So if you got a rusty shovel and you're taking your soil sample, you're going to get iron higher than it really is, okay? If you don't have anything but a rusty tool, then use it, and with your hand, take that soil from a part of that did not touch the rust there. Okay. Okay, here our zinc is so low. The previous one, the zinc was actually toxic there. It was so high. Here we actually have to add some zinc. And then the manganese here is at 13.7. It says high. We've got to bring that up. And the boron is a little lower. We've got to bring that up there. Okay. So now we go to the recommendations, and what they do is put this together for us. You'll see that some of these things are in here in a quarter, half a pound, 1 pound, quarter pound. They're per 1,000 square feet. And for most people, it is far easier and less expensive. There's a company back there, not International Ag Lab, but another one that we send this report to, and they measure these things out exactly. Then they mix it for us, and then they ship it out in the large flat rate boxes with the U.S. Post Office. That's the least expensive way to ship this stuff. It's heavy, and it's far less expensive to ship it that way. That's been a real boon to this business and to gardens. It's far less expensive than going to the store and trying to pick out each one of these things individually, because you'll end up, let's take copper for instance. Cost me well over $200 for a bag of copper, and you use so little of it. This is a quarter of a pound. You use so little of it that it ends up staying in the garage for the next 50 years there. Besides, if you were to take all of this, you would need to mix it all evenly. You can't spread a pound of something evenly over 1,000 square feet. When this is all mixed together, and then you broadcast it and dig it in, every plant is going to get what it needs. Okay, now this is a 3-part program. What we're looking at here is the High Bricks program. It's a 3-part program to make your soil fertile. So first we have to put the right things in the soil. Then we have to put the right life in the soil. Now, we need microbes. We need we need these little critters under our feet to digest the soil and the rock powders there. But we need to give them the right minerals. They can't manufacture that. So we give them the right material, and then what is going to make your soil more fertile than everything else we do is to make that soil alive. And as we go through this list here of the recommendations, down here we come to something called Eden. Well, what on earth is Eden? It's a product that looks like kelp. Kelp is simply the food or the carrier for it. What we're doing is putting life into that soil, okay? And when that, it's in a spore form, it's a dormant form. So when that gets water and food, which is the kelp, and normal growing temperatures, that's about 60 degrees and higher. Those things come to life and they will multiply very fast. And in a short time, you've got an army of workers for you under the ground. That's more important than everything else that you do put together. Okay, how often do we test the soil? It depends on the size of the garden, okay? If you were a big farm, we would be testing several times during the year. Because on a big farm, if I can raise, or that farmer can raise or lower his production by 10%, that might make the difference between a very successful year or bankruptcy. In a backyard garden, usually every other year, okay? So rather than test it every year, maybe every other year, and the backyard garden, if I plant an extra tomato plant or two, we'll make up the difference. We're not trying to make a living off of the garden here. We're trying to make healing, good food for you there. Okay, so that's what this product Eden is. And then let's go over to the next page. And it says transplant formula. This is the second place where we're putting life into that soil. Transplant formula is a gray powder, which is rock powders. These are different types of rocks, which are food for the microbes. There, again, we have them in the microbes in a dormant form, and again, with the right conditions, water and temperature, they're going to come to life and work for you. Okay. If you put a line underneath that transplant formula, that would be the end of the first of these three things that we need to do to make your soil very, very fertile. Okay? So now let's go to the nutrient drenches. Now, if we have a huge meal at Thanksgiving, can we then not eat until Christmas? Okay? But most people, they'll put a whole bunch of stuff on their garden, and then they won't put anything else on it for the season. There. Do the nutrient drenches. You need the first part here to give the basics into that soil, the minerals there. Now we need the nutrient drenches, and you put those on every 3 weeks here, sometimes every 2 weeks to every 4 weeks, depending on your soil test here. But here, every 3 weeks, we're going to take a product called Cal Mag Plus. That's calcium, magnesium plus. According to our soil test here, we needed calcium, we needed magnesium, we needed some other things, and it's all in that formula there. So we're going to take 1 quart of that. We're going to put it in 30 gallons of water. Okay, we're going to put it in lots of water there. To that, we're going to add 2 ounces of Z-Hume. That's a humate. This is now the third place that we are putting life into that soil. This is a liquid now. The other 2 were dry. But we're putting life into that soil, and we're stimulating it. We're feeding it at the same time. It's very important that we get the right things going there. Then we're going to spread that all out over this 1,000 square foot garden. An easy way to do that is to, if you have a hose end sprayer, is to put in the 2 ounces of Z-Hume and fill the rest up with the Cal Mag Plus and just spray until it's all gone. Okay, when it's all empty, spray a little more so that you wash the fertilizers off the leaves, and it'll be just fine there. Now, there's another product over here. It says OND. That stands, you can write in there, that's Organic Nutrient Drench. OND. Organic Nutrient Drench. Now, your soil recommendations will be different. It could be similar, but it'll be different from this because your soil is different from this. So, first time we're going to use Cal Mag Plus. We're going to add the 2 ounces of Z-Hume and 30 gallons of water. 3 weeks later, we're going to take a quart of OND, Organic Nutrient Drench. We're going to add the 2 ounces of Z-Hume, and we're going to do the same thing, 30 gallons of water out over that. We're going to go back and forth. Don't mix those 2 together. They're giving your plants different things, okay? And you want them at different times, all right? Okay, if you put a line underneath here, that ends the second part of this fertility program here. Now we go to foliar sprays, and this is feeding the plant through the stomata. Now this is done weekly. Before we were doing it every 3 weeks. Now this is done weekly. All right, so you need a sprayer, a clean sprayer, not one you used Roundup in. And now we're using only 1 gallon. Before we were using 30 gallons. Now we're just using 1 gallon, and we're using 4 ounces of either Brix Blaster or Qualify, depending on what we want to do here. These are 2 different products. All right, let's look at the Qualify. So we fill up a gallon sprayer, and let's say 4 ounces of Qualify for leafy greens, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower. You can write in there for root vegetables, any root vegetables except carrots. That's one exception here. But now, so you can use this on just about anything. Now, then it says use Brix Blaster on everything else. Now, Brix Blaster is going to move your plant towards flowering and fruiting. If my tomato plant is that big, I don't want it to flower and fruit, because the plant either is leaning towards flowering and fruiting or making vegetative growth. I want my tomato plant to be at least this tall before I want to push it towards flowering and fruiting. So when it's big enough, it doesn't matter whether it's a tomato or a cucumber or pepper, make sure that that plant is big enough that you want to change it into this flowering and fruiting mode there. Now, there will always be some flowering and fruiting push in the plant and some vegetative growth. When my plants are this small, my tomato plants are this small, I'm going to use Qualify on it. I'm going to wait till it's big enough, and then I'll switch it over, and it will produce far, far more. Okay, so I'm going to do that every week. Okay. And now I want to go, and the next one here says Enthuse, foliar spray weekly, but we're going now to 2 ounces there. It says, as needed for plant stress. Right in alongside of that word stress, right in vigor, plant vigor, okay? That might be a better illustration here. This is a very good product, but if your plant needs a boost, you could use this as for plant vigor there. Down here, okay, what kind of sprayer do you use? Just any kind of a hand pump. Okay, what do we use when we're putting out the nutrient drenches? Good question. I like that hose end sprayer that it's a quart, and you just screw it on the end of your hose, and that's an easy way to do it. If you don't do that, take a 30-gallon trash can, fill it up with water, put these things in, and just water it out by hand. It's just fine there. We want to water the underside of the leaves. Most of the stomata are under the leaves and on the stem. And now farmers, when they go out and foliar feed, they just blow this stuff everywhere, and it gets it adequately. You do want to do it either early in the morning or late evening, or I should say early evening. You want to do it maybe starting an hour before sunrise until an hour after sunset. Why? Because those are the times when the songbirds sing. There's more oxygen in the air, and that turns these songbirds on to singing. The birds' songs open the stomata larger, okay? And so it's an interesting phenomenon how it works. You could have a songbird in a totally dark cage, and if you increase the oxygen, that bird will start to sing. No light at all, but it'll start to sing. But you see, there's a time of the day when there's more oxygen or less oxygen in the air. And this works very, very nicely there. Okay. All right, and I talked about Enthuse. Let's use that for plant vigor, a good product. But you see we're cutting that product down to 2 ounces now instead of 4 ounces. Don't overdo it. Do this in the right proportions. It's 35 minutes one way from my house to this garden at the church. And I went there one day for class and did not have anything to measure with. And so this was early in my experience there, and I just dumped some stuff in and sprayed there. I just about ruined the whole garden. I ended up with little black spots on every leaf and on every green bean and every zucchini and everything there. So if you do it correctly, follow these directions, right? Don't think, if a little bit is good, a lot is not better, okay? Let me give you another example on that. We all have lots of salt in our bodies. If I cut my finger, my blood is salty. If I get a tear or drop of sweat into my mouth, it's very salty. We die quickly without that salt. If I take 5 little teaspoons of salt, doesn't matter whether it's C90 or any other salt, if I take it at one time, that's a lethal dose. That's enough to kill me, okay? So what's necessary for life, for us and our plants, out of balance, is absolutely toxic. There. Okay, down here it says foliar spray monthly. Now we're going to 1.5 ounce of Way Ahead 10X and some dextrose and whatever. There's a place for this, but not in the backyard garden. That's just cross that off if you've got a backyard garden. You got a farm, we're going to use that. That's going to be beneficial to you, but not for your backyard garden there. Okay, this is an interesting result. This is a little Fuji apple tree that I had planted in my garden. This is in the middle of the day. This is snow in the background, and you can see that the temperature is 32 degrees, maybe 31 degrees there. And this little apple tree didn't know it was winter. It just kept right on growing there. By the end of the winter and the spring, just a few of the leaves on the top were still green. The rest had fallen there. But an interesting thing is that you will find that when you use the ocean water in the right proportions on your fruit trees, it acts as a bit of antifreeze. The soils are more, the sap is more condensed, and it's a benefit there. Okay, that's my sister's hand in there to give you a perspective of that. Okay. Okay, we cannot buy food like this anywhere, except for a very few market gardens who are growing this way. And we need, listen, if you have any interest at all in doing a market garden, we need this, and we need it locally in all of our different communities here. We could do a tremendous amount of good for people if we would have food grown this way. Another thing is if people are used to eating rich foods and whatever, they're not going to stay on an Eden diet unless it tastes good. None of us are going to stay on a diet unless it tastes good. So this is a way to just really increase the flavor there. I do recommend different growing systems for different people here. Now, the same basic ingredients for growing are included in each garden system. How they are supplied, compost, minerals, fertilizers, will be very different. Okay, this is an example of grow your own nutrition program. This is a 4 foot wide by 8 foot long box, and there are 2 of them together. Okay, that's the smallest that this particular system goes in. And it was very, very productive. There's another picture of that, those 2 boxes together. Okay. Okay, this is the most expensive per square foot. It's absolutely the most expensive per square foot. It's the most convenient. For small gardens, 2 of these 4 by 8 boxes to about 15, it might make good sense. If you're a very busy professional person, this might be the simplest and easiest way of doing it. don't add any supplements to it. The soil test is going to tell us exactly what to put there. Do not add anything to that. You'll just cause it to go out of balance. There's another, it's 6 weeks after planting. That is very, very productive.
Where is that?
That's in Placerville, California.
Okay.
And that is Tracy Lemon's garden. Tracy, can I ask you to come up front? Are you willing to do that? Now, I'm going to make a spectacle out of Tracy here. Tracy, when she came to me about a little less than a year ago, could not look up. She was bent over like this, and she'd have to look at me like this, and it was difficult there. Tracy has been eating out of this garden, and stand up straight, Tracy.
Almost there. Praise the Lord.
Yes.
You know, that's what he wants. He wants witnesses. Yes. And when we follow the plan,
yes,
the results are there and the abundance is there to share and still be well ourselves. And he and Donna Faye have been extremely supportive and generous. And he's done a lot of the work because the agreement was we would exchange services and collaborate. And I didn't realize how much work there was in the garden. I said, I'm so sorry, I think I better do more in the office and you do the gardening. But yes, it's a testimony.
Yes.
Praise
Thank
the
you.
Lord. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
Our bodies want to heal themselves. God has made us so that we'll heal ourselves if we do the right thing. So everything we do has consequences. So we're either building our bodies up or we're tearing them down there. Okay, let's go on here, see what else we have. Okay, 3 weeks from planting, we started getting produce in Tracy's garden. Very simple, excellent quality of food, simplest way to grow a garden. We call this a biological garden. Now, it's recommended over certified organic because it's superior in nutrition. There are no poisons, there are no toxic substances. However, some of the materials cannot be used in certified organic gardens. Just one example, potassium sulfate is used in some of these gardens if your soil test shows that we need it. But there are companies that go to the trouble and expense of certifying their potassium sulfate as organic. There are others who do not, and it's the same identical product. Okay, so why make the cost go up if we don't have to? There are other things like calcium nitrate and ammonium sulfate, which we have recommended here that you just saw, that I could never use in a certified organic garden because they're chemical fertilizers made in a chemical fertilizer plant. We'd never get them certified organic. However, let's talk about calcium nitrate first. God makes calcium nitrate. Every time it rains or snows or lightning strikes the ground, out of the sky comes nitrogen, unites with calcium in the ground, and it makes calcium nitrate. Okay? If I were going to do that, if I were to bring the calcium nitrate level up to where we want it organically, it's going to take me 3 to 5 years. I can get it immediately using calcium nitrate, but I can't certify that organic. Every time, let's go to ammonium sulfate. Every time you go by a barnyard and it stinks, that's nature making ammonium sulfate. If your compost pile stinks, the same thing's happening. Okay, so we can use those products in a biological garden, and we can jumpstart that garden so that you have good produce this year, this season. Now it'll get better over a period of time, but you'll have an excellent garden right from the start, rather than having to certify it. Now some of you may need to certify your garden organically because of customers that require it. And if you want, we'll do it organically, but it's going to be slower and more expensive, and we are not able to use some of these products. Let's see, this is just some of the produce that we have. I did a little quick calculation, and basically we ended up with about 1 3/4 pounds of produce out of Tracy's garden per day. Per day, yeah. And we didn't start counting immediately, but anyway, it's good. All right, there are those beds put together, and I want to show you a couple of things here. I want to show you how this goes together. We have, in most of the United States, we have a huge problem with gophers. So what is good is if you make a box for your garden, and you put 1/4-inch hardware cloth in the bottom. Okay, so you make this, you turn this upside down, and you staple that hardware cloth. It's 1/4-inch hardware cloth there all the way around. Make sure that you have no place where the gopher can get in. If you've got a 1/2 inch or more, especially if you got 1 inch, he'll go round and round that garden until he finds a way to get in. Now you've got him trapped in your garden. Okay, so you want to make sure that he stays out. Don't use chicken wire. That has too big of holes, and they'll go right through that. There. It's probably easier if you use 2x4s for the first bit there, and then turn that up, and then build up from that. Where you have these, where the boards come together here, it's a good idea to use a landscape cloth just on the inside of that, so that soil and water doesn't run through that way, so it goes down. Now, the roots can come and they can go through that hardware cloth, but make that bed at least 18 inches tall, okay? I've seen a lot of people that made maybe a 6-inch or 8-inch board around, and one lady came to my class, this was a few years back, and she kept telling me, Lynn, she said, I'm doing everything right. And she always took careful notes and whatever. She says, but there's something wrong with my garden. So anyway, I finally went out to her house and looked at her garden. Sure enough, she had the most beautiful little plants there. She had zucchini that was smaller than my thumb. And all of her plants, see, she was using the right things there. So all of her plants looked very healthy and very nice. But what was happening, her husband had made her these boxes, and the gophers were coming underneath. Every time a plant roots went through that, the gopher would cut it off. There. Well, we bonsai plants by pruning the roots and by tying them. There. So she had the most beautiful bonsai green beans and zucchini and whatever there. So give yourself at least 18 inches, and if you can go 24 inches, you would be better on that. I don't know any way to keep the gophers out totally. Now, I'll show you some other pictures of gardens that are not protected at all, that are right alongside of this. And we do use a product called Molemax, Molemax, okay? What it is castor oil, or when we use the castor bean and we squeeze the oil out of it, and what's left over is this bean pulp, and they use that for feed for some animals and whatever. All rodents just really dislike that. So if you put that out over your garden, it's about $20 to cover 4,000 square feet. You're going to have to do it several times, and it's not perfect, but the gophers go away. So I tried that in my garden, which is next to this one, and sure enough, it worked. Those gophers all moved out of my garden into my lawn. Okay, let's go on. Okay, just more of the same here. There, that gives you a good idea of what that works like. Now, this is by actual soil tests. This is some of the poorest soil in our whole county. And our county goes from 10,000 feet high to a few feet above sea level. there. So we sifted, there I'm using hardware cloth again, and sifted this out. And to that, we put in some perlite, and we also put in, what did we put in? We put in peat moss there. Peat moss has about a 0 nutrient value. We didn't want to add nutrients to this. And you could put in some sand, too, if you needed to lighten that soil. The soil is so hard when it's dry that it's hard to dig with a pickaxe. And when it's wet, it's so gummy that you can hardly walk in it. You walk across the dirt there, and your boots have this much dirt on them there. Okay, let's go on here. Okay, while we put this together, now this is in dry California, so while we put this together, we put in water every now and then, so we would have enough there. All right. Okay. Now we are switching to the Hybrix garden. And this is a Hybrix garden in Camino, California. A fellow got started there. I wish we had one of these in every community there. He's using the ocean water salts. He's using the right procedures. Now, if you're going to go into a market garden, we're going to put you on a different program. Where it's a little more complicated, but you've got to mix some of these things and do the math and whatever, and take regular soil tests there, but it'll work for you there, and it will cost you less per square foot, less per pound of produce that you're producing there. Okay, let's go to Garden in a Box. This is the least expensive, very easy to use, medium-sized gardens. We're going to combine this with 10 pounds of agricultural limestone or gypsum and 2 ounces of boron and 8 ounces of Epsom salts. Now, this is 10 pounds. This is ounces. So don't put 10 pounds in, and don't forget to change this to ounces, because if you put in 2 pounds of borax, you'll kill everything. Same thing here. There. Now, soil testing is not required, but it is recommended. And if you get a soil test with this, we'll vary these things depending on the soil test. Now, there are a lot of people, for whatever reason, that it just doesn't make sense to spend $68 or so just to find out what's there. Maybe somebody's renting, or maybe they're just too poor to do that. You'll still get a great garden where I've sent these out, and we've had repeat customers. Everybody that I've talked to has been very pleased with the results of this. This is Dr. Mitleider's work years after he is gone. All right, now this is Tracy's garden that you saw earlier, and those are shade covers there. This is my garden in a box, which I've used there for a couple of years. Very productive, and I have purposely done it there. Least expensive way to grow, no soil test, all materials are organic, combines the use of locally purchased products. If I sent you a box of limestone, which are the right kind of lime for your garden, from back east, like we do with the other, it would cost more for the shipping. So buy this locally, and it'll do just fine. It'll cover about 200 square foot row, or about 1,000 square foot garden there. This is what it looks like. In that room over there, we've got a bunch of them on the table and under the table there. It's going to come with 2 bags of a product called 644. That's just the fertilizer numbers, organic material, 1 bag of earthworm castings, and 1 bag of C90. This is just 1 pound of the C90 in that small bag there. After your garden is established, this is for Garden in a Box. After it's established, apply the nutrient drench once per week. Now, this is a different nutrient drench. The other nutrient drench that we talked about, you could put through a fertigation system or whatever. This nutrient drench is made out of earthworm castings. Earthworm castings and the 644. there. So per gallon of water, you're going to use 1 ounce of each per gallon of water. So if you've got a 5-gallon bucket, you might want to put 5 ounces of each in, mix it up. It will always have a muddy residue in the bottom. It's not going to dissolve totally. That's good stuff. Just when you get to the bottom, rinse it out, put it out on the plants. It'll do a great job. So this you want to use 1 time per week. You want that nutrient drench once a week, and your plants will grow and do very, very well with that. That's the Sun Gold tomato, and it's awful hard to get those in the market. But I try to grow them in each garden that I have, and people come to garden class, they'll go down and graze on those tomatoes because they're some of the sweetest. In Brixing food, tomatoes, you need to be about 7 or greater to have a really good tomato taste. And those little Sun Gold tomatoes I've had up as high as 18. They're just incredibly good there. This is an early girl tomato there, and it is a very good flavor there. There's more produce out of that garden. Okay, weekly feed, 1 ounce per gallon of water of each there. And we are out of time, so we're going to go. We're making a nutrient drench. I just measured that out, put it in a bucket, mixed it up with water, and then put it out there. You want to measure that pretty accurately there. See how dirty that is? It'll never come clean like the other, but it's good. All right, we use that for a transplant water and for a nutrient drench. It's the same thing, okay? You don't want to use the transplant water when you're putting seeds in the ground. Because of the high nitrogen content, it will slow down the germination of seeds. So we don't want to use this when you're doing seeds. Just use plain water.